The third general election in 4 years will take place on December the 12th. The polls and the bookies have the Tories as favourite, but nobody is betting the ranch on it.
This bill, it would set the date for the next election on the 9th of December.
They had blocked a general election. Now the Lib Dems and SNP decided it was time to go to the country, but on a different date from the one planned by the government.
They have to agree to a general election on December the 12th.
Many Labour MPs remained less than enthusiastic.
I, for one, don't trust Boris Johnson at all, and why the Lib Dems are queuing up to give him exactly what I want is completely inexplicable.
And writing to the EU Council, he says, "I have no discretion."
On Monday, the Prime Minister wrote the letter he said he'd never write.
He said that he would never ask for an extension, and he said he'd rather die in a ditch. Another broken promise.
But Jeremy Corbyn was still resisting a general election. Then, on Tuesday, the Labour leader changed tack.
Shadow Cabinet totally united. Is that agreed? Yeah!
We're going out there to fight an election campaign.
And we're going out there to win, OK?
Order!
Last night, the Commons gave an election the go-ahead. Tonight, I'll be speaking to the woman who says she'll be our next Prime Minister, Liberal Democrat leader Jo Swinson, and the man charged with securing a majority for Boris Johnson, Tory party chairman James Cleverly. Good evening. As a general election campaign gets underway, we join you live from Westminster, where only a few months ago Boris Johnson said an election before Brexit would be the height of folly. The same Westminster where Jeremy Corbyn consistently demanded an election, then equally consistently voted against having one, until even he or his party ran out of excuses. The very Westminster where the Lib Dems and the SNP largely followed Labour's script until they had a road to the ballot box conversion last weekend, which broke the logjam. Now we're off to the polls. I guess it proves the maxim that if something is denied often enough around these parts, it means it's almost certainly going to happen. I'm joined now by the Liberal Democrat leader, Jo Swinson. Welcome.
Good to be with you, Andrew.
You've been instrumental in making this election happen, so why have you risked going down in the history books as the party leader that paved the way for Boris Johnson to win an overall majority, deliver his Brexit, and govern for the next 5 years?
Well, the Liberal Democrats want to stop Brexit, as you know, and we have long said that we felt the best way to do that was through a people's vote. But the situation that we found ourselves in over the last week to 10 days was one where Boris Johnson had got a deal with the European Union. He had secured a second reading for that bill in Parliament, helped by 19 Labour MPs. And the prospect of getting a majority in Parliament for a people's vote felt more distant rather than closer. And so the best way to stop Brexit became a general election.
But you've given a Tory Prime Minister the Christmas present he craved.
Well, nothing is certain about this election.
Oh, no, I'm not saying
election.
that, but this is what he wanted. I mean, Tony Blair, he's every bit as much a Remainer as you. He wants to reject it. He says a general election is, quote, an act of extraordinary stupidity. It will pave the way for a Tory Brexit. Now, that's not certain, but there's a good chance he's right.
Well, it's certainly a risk, but so would continuing have been. And I feel the risk would have been that Boris Johnson would have got his Brexit deal bill through with the help of Labour MPs. And the other thing that we needed to bear in mind was that until Monday of this week, we didn't have the extension to Article 50. And indeed, from conversations with fellow EU counterparts, there was a lot of resistance and reluctance.
Particularly from Paris.
Particularly the French. And indeed, the intervention that myself with the SNP made at the weekend gave them the confidence that they needed to offer that extension and prevent us crashing out without a deal on Thursday, tomorrow, which otherwise could have been the case.
But why did you give up so easily on a second referendum in this Parliament?
I don't agree with that characterisation. We have tabled amendments 17 times for a people's vote.
But there hasn't been a vote on a second referendum for 6 months.
Well, there would have been within the last 10 days if the Labour Party had backed our amendment, because with their support it would have been selected by the Speaker and put to a vote. But that's just the latest example of where Labour haven't backed it. Well, I mean, certainly, as I say, Labour haven't been backing it wholeheartedly. 19 Labour MPs voted for the deal. And also it's the case that those Conservative rebels, some of whom had been moving towards a people's vote, had definitely become cooler on the idea since Boris Johnson got his deal with the EU.
Well, look, we are where we are. Do you accept if the Conservatives win a majority in this election that they will have a mandate for their Brexit deal?
I accept if they win a majority that they will push through their Brexit deal. I'll still argue and believe that it's a bad Brexit deal, but I entirely expect that they will take that as a mandate to push that forward. And
no,
of course,
but
in that
you accept
scenario,
that it will be a mandate?
They would have the votes to push it through Parliament, wouldn't they?
So if Boris Johnson wins this election, and at the moment he's favourite, but we know many things can change, but at the moment he is, you'll accept it's game over, that Brexit is happening, and you'll call off the campaign for another referendum?
I'm not going to call off campaigning for what I believe in. And in the same way that when I was first elected in 2005 and Tony Blair had a large majority, I didn't stop campaigning for Liberal Democrat policies and ideas and the things that I believe in. But clearly, if Boris Johnson wins a majority, he will have the votes to deliver his Brexit deal. I'll still keep campaigning for the things that I believe in and that people will vote for me to do.
But you've said, in the unlikely event that you were to win an overall majority, that you would have the mandate to revoke Article 50 and just cancel Brexit. So it surely must follow
and in that scenario,
if he wins,
I would have the votes in Parliament to support that position.
So it surely must follow if he wins, he has a mandate to carry out Brexit.
And if I win a
I just want you to confirm that.
No, this is an important point, because if I win a Liberal Democrat majority government and I'm Prime Minister and I revoke Article 50, I don't anticipate that people that think that Brexit's a good idea will suddenly agree that revoking Article 50 is a good idea.
I'm not asking you to change your mind. I'm just asking you that if he gets an overall majority in this election, he has the mandate to take us out on his terms.
Well, he'll do that. I'll keep arguing and campaigning.
Why are you so reluctant to say he has the mandate?
Well, I mean, he would. He would do it, right? But he would. But I would campaign still for the things I believe in.
I understand that. And speaking of you forming the next government, here's one of your leaflets. Here, I'll just show it up for the camera to see it. It says, Joe Swinson, Britain's next Prime Minister. When did you indulge in fantasy politics?
I'm standing as a candidate to be Prime Minister, Andrew.
No one stands as a candidate to be Prime Minister. You're standing as a candidate in Easington Barton.
I'm standing as the leader of the Liberal Democrats, and you're right, we have a parliamentary democracy system, and the leader of the party who secures the most MPs or a majority of MPs becomes Prime Minister.
Believe it or not, I do know how it works.
So that is the sense in which I'm a candidate to be Prime Minister.
But you know, I know, our viewers know, you're not going to be the next Prime Minister.
Well, hang on a second, Andrew. We're about to have a general election where millions of people out there are going to cast their votes.
We know that.
And exactly. And it's not up to you to tell them what they can and can't choose.
No, you can't play. I'm not telling them. Yeah. I'm not telling them. I'm saying that from everything we know about politics, our viewers, you as well, every commentator knows you're not the next Prime Minister, and it's unrealistic for you to say so.
I cannot disagree with you more on this, Andrew. Right? We are in a very volatile political situation. Plenty of people said they didn't think Jeremy Corbyn would become leader of the Labour Party. Plenty of people said they didn't think Donald Trump would ever become president of the United States. Plenty of people said that they didn't think that Brexit would ever happen. We have seen many unprecedented political results in recent years.
So would you rule out global domination?
I'm standing.
I mean, you're probably as good a chance of that as being Prime Minister.
I disagree. Look, Liberal Democrats, let's face it, Liberal Democrats beat both the Conservative Party and the Labour Party in a national election for the first time in 100 years.
Nigel Farage's party came first in the European elections. He's not going to win this election, is he?
Well, I hope he won't.
Right.
He'll be standing in the election, clearly.
OK, look, that's what you say. And politicians who want to be our Prime Minister should know what they're talking about. So I just want to show you this, what you told Parliament last week about the official Treasury assessment on Brexit. Let's watch this.
The government's own assessment in November 2018 looked at the impact of a free trade agreement arrangement on the British economy and concluded that that would mean that our economy would shrink by more than 6%, an amount which is greater than the way the economy shrank during the financial crash.
So you're saying there that even with a free trade deal, Brexit would mean our economy shrinking by over 6%. And you pointed out there that was bigger than the contraction in the great crash of 2008. But the Treasury didn't say that, did it?
The 2018, well, first of all, I want them to publish an economic impact assessment
about this Brexit. No, that's a different matter. This has already been published.
So I'm having to go...
You were quoting the November 2018 Treasury assessment.
So I'm having to go
It didn't say that, did it?
Well, that was what the average free trade agreement scenario was going to be.
It didn't say the economy would contract by 6%, as you said there. What the Treasury assessment said, that in 15 years' time, 15 years' time, the economy would be 6% smaller with a free trade deal than if we stayed in.
Yes.
6% smaller, not a 6% contraction. The economy would still grow by a lot, but not by as much if we stayed in. That's not a contraction.
In real terms, it absolutely would be, because that's compared. Yes, it would.
Look, in 2008,
it would,
in 2008, the British economy contracted by 6%. In other words, it was 6% smaller in 1 year.
Absolutely accept it was in a different time frame.
Whereas what the Treasury is saying here is we'll continue to grow over the next 15 years, but not as fast. That's not a contraction.
Not at the pace to keep pace with people's standard of living and the rising prices.
But it's not a contraction.
It's a hit to the economy. It's a hit to the economy and where the economy would be.
So would you like to correct it tonight to say that you didn't mean a 6% contraction, it was a slower growth than we would get if we stayed in?
That our economy, yes, would be more than 6% smaller, 6.4%, I think is the figure that was in that report.
Over 15 years.
Over 15 years. And I would love to see what that was over 5, but they didn't produce the numbers for what would happen. In fact, we don't know if it, in fact, would have been a much greater hit in the early years of that and then some mild recovery, because they haven't published those figures, Andrew. And I think the question we need to ask is why they haven't published...
What you told the Commons for an aspiring Prime Minister was misleading.
I think the essence is pretty spot on, but I absolutely think the question is, why are they not publishing those economic impact assessments? And it is because they know it will be damning.
That's not what I was asking you, but never mind. I think we've kind of clarified that. Will the Lib Dems contemplate doing deals with other parties at a constituency level in this election to concentrate Remain votes around one candidate?
We are in discussions with Plaid Cymru and the Green Party in an organisation called Unite to Remain, where we have been having discussions about arrangements similar to what we did in the Brecon and Brandishire by-election.
Which you won because the Welsh Nationalists,
Plaid Cymru
and I think the Greens too, they stood back.
They stood back to stand alongside us, if you like, to say we want to elect a candidate that will be pro-Remain. So we're in discussions.
What about the Scottish Nationalists? Are you discussing with them?
They're not involved in these discussions.
Why not?
Well, clearly we agree on some elements such as stopping Brexit, but as you will well know from Scottish politics, that's not the only big and controversial constitutional issue in Scotland. And I think it's important that people have the choice to vote not only on what their preference is on Brexit, but also their views on whether Scotland remains part of the UK or not. And that is also a very important issue to many people in Scotland.
But the Welsh Nationalists are now in favour of independence for Wales, just as the Scottish Nationals are in favour of independence for Scotland. So why deal with one and not the other?
Well, look, the Plaid Cymru and ourselves have managed to have very cordial arrangements and discussions that are progressing well. There hasn't been the appetite in Scotland, I think, for the reasons that I set out, and it is a different political
environment. What about Uxbridge, the Prime Minister's seat here in London? Labour's challenging strongly. It's got a strong Remain candidate there. Mr Johnson's majority is only 5,000. You came a pretty poor third in 2017. Why not stand aside and help defeat Mr Johnson?
Well, I think the problem with that is in the premise of your question that Labour has a strong Remain candidate.
Well, it does.
Well, The Labour Party is not a Remain party. I mean, you can ask Jeremy Corbyn
I didn't
this
say that.
time
I
and
said
again.
the candidate was Remain. Was strongly Remain.
Except candidates take their party whip, and the Labour manifesto, we haven't seen it yet, but it looks like their policy is going to be to negotiate a Brexit deal because they want to deliver Brexit. And they say
then
that
put it to a second referendum.
And they say this time and time again, they want to deliver Brexit. They won't even say firmly which way they will campaign. So we cannot trust that Labour is in fact any kind of Remain party. They've proven time and again they're not.
If Labour ends up the largest party, but without an overall majority, is there any arrangement that you could come to with Labour to allow it to form a government?
I've been really clear. Jeremy Corbyn is not going to be put into number 10 on the back of Liberal Democrat votes, nor is Boris Johnson. Both of them want Brexit to happen. Neither of them are fit to be Prime Minister.
So how do you get a second referendum without a Labour government?
We have Liberal Democrat MPs elected because we're about to go into a general election where millions of people get the chance to choose.
In the highly unlikely event, given because you've obviously convinced me, that you're not the next Prime Minister, how do you get a second referendum without a Labour government?
Look, in this election, people have a clear choice. The Liberal Democrats are standing to stop Brexit.
No, we know they have a clear choice. But if Labour ends up the largest party, but without an overall majority, but you won't help it form a government, you don't get a second referendum.
We will vote for a second referendum, but we're not going to put Jeremy Corbyn into number 10. He's not fit to do the job, and he wants to deliver Brexit.
So you don't get a second referendum then?
Well, he wants to deliver Brexit, right? He's a Brexiteer.
He's also promised a second referendum, and unless you help him get into power, you certainly ain't going to get one with the Tories. So unless you help Mr Corbyn into power, you don't get one with Labour either.
Jeremy Corbyn is a Brexiteer, but that's not the only problem with Jeremy Corbyn. This is also a man who has allowed things to be done in his name and his party where there have been serious complaints about anti-Semitism, and he has refused to take the action necessary to deal with that. Now, that is a fundamental problem.
So that's
in terms
why
of
you
his
won't.
values.
That's another reason why you won't deal with them, even at the cost of not getting a second referendum.
We will always campaign for a second referendum. We will always vote to have a people's vote if we're unable to secure a Liberal Democrat majority to revoke Article 50 outright. And we'll continue to do that in the next Parliament, but we're going to have many, many more Liberal Democrat MPs because we know that we're competitive in hundreds of seats around the country.
Jo Swinson, thanks for being with us tonight. I hope we get a chance to speak again as the campaign develops. So tomorrow's Halloween, and we'll be leaving the EU at 11 p.m. Well, that was the Prime Minister's do or die promise. Turns out it was more of a trick than a treat. But Boris Johnson's pitch at this election is vote Tory to get Brexit done. And the man charged with securing a majority for Boris Johnson is Conservative Party Chairman James Cleverly. He joins me now. Welcome.
Andrew, hi.
So, if the Conservatives win an overall majority in this election on December the 12th, when do we leave the EU?
Well, we will put that deal forward to the House. We'll put that forward as soon as we are able to. Hopefully we'll get that voted through the House, end the delay, end the uncertainty, and leave at the end of whichever month it is that we are able to get that through. So that's December, that will be the end of December, and we'd prefer to do it as early as possible.
So possibly before the new year?
Possibly, but I mean, the situation is, as we've seen, this isn't completely in our hands. There have been, through this last few months, a number of people who've done everything they can to try. No,
but we're talking about in the context of an overall Tory majority.
We'll look to get that through as soon as we're able.
So by the end of January at the latest?
Absolutely.
Do or die?
Yes.
Come what may?
Yes.
Dying in a ditch?
If it comes to it.
You've told us all that before, and it turned out to be untrue.
The difference, hopefully this time round, is that if we have a stable working majority, where we actually see Parliament working the way it's meant to work, which is the government governs and the opposition parties in the backbench hold the government to account. If we had that stable working majority, we would be able to deliver this deal, and it's a good deal.
Right.
It's a deal that works for the UK. Works for the EU,
so
works for Ireland.
You're claiming that if you want Brexit, vote Tory. That's your simple message. But you didn't need an election to deliver Brexit, did you?
No, absolutely.
Well, hold on. The Brexit deal won a healthy majority in its second reading, a crucial parliamentary hurdle. It got 30 majority. The PM called it joyful. The Commons, he said, embraced the deal. So why didn't you just proceed through Parliament with this deal and deliver Brexit?
Because what we saw immediately afterwards, almost unprecedented. Normally what you get on second reading, I don't want to get too much into the process, but normally you get the second reading vote and then immediately afterwards you get a vote through on the timetable. It often goes through without a vote. But the very people who claimed they wanted to deliver Brexit then immediately voted to delay the process.
Because you wanted to do it all in 3 days. They wanted longer. Why not giving them longer? And you would have got your Brexit deal.
No, I don't believe that would have happened. I explain why. I sit on the government benches and I look across at the opposition benches at a host of people who have claimed that in certain circumstances they would vote to deliver Brexit. They claimed that if the referendum was done, they would deliver Brexit. They claimed if Theresa May came back with a deal, they would vote to deliver Brexit. They claimed that if we'd strip out the future declaration, if we'd give them more time. They keep giving reasons. They keep giving the circumstances under which they would vote for it. And then when those circumstances come to pass, hey presto, they don't vote for it. I just don't believe them anymore.
You don't.
So that's why we need a stable working majority to get on with Brexit, get it done, and then move on to the domestic agenda that we set out.
Let's see what Michael Gove said earlier this year about this. Let's just hear what he was saying.
The danger is that if we vote for a potential Prime Minister who said, whatever happens, I'm going to leave on October the 31st, we will be voting for a Prime Minister who will not be able to deliver Brexit before there's a general election. The Conservatives will lose that general election, and that choice will lead to Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, the first part of Mr. Gove's prediction was true. You must be worried the second part's true as well.
So I absolutely stand by our commitment to working to leave on the 31st of October. And the reason
just failed to deliver.
The reason for that is because it was the belief, perhaps for the first time in 3 years, that the UK was serious about leaving, that actually triggered the European Union to be flexible and pragmatic and actually change the elements the Prime Minister set out in the withdrawal agreement so we could get the deal through. So that deadline helped us get that deal. Well, I disagree with Michael about our prospects.
But I guess for viewers in an election, it's a matter of trust in a sense. So let's look at one of your recent Facebook adverts here. And it's got a number of what your priorities are. Brexit by October the 31st. Well, that's gone by the board. That first priority you haven't met. The NHS, schools, police, the economy. Let's take the NHS. You promised, and you've been claiming record spending, but it will only come after spending on the NHS is pretty much flatlined for the past 10 years. You're just making up for lost time.
What that 10 years was about was repairing the economic car crash that we inherited from the Labour Party. When we stepped into government in 2010, the UK economy was on the verge of collapse.
We've been through all that. My point
is... If you're going to bring up 10-year-old stuff, you've got to let me defend that.
No, my point is that although you think you're being generous to the NHS now, it doesn't make up for the famine the NHS has faced for the past 9 years. That's the point.
The economic car crash that we inherited from Labour meant that we had to rebalance the economy and reducing unemployment, all those things really, really important as a precursor to what we've always wanted to do, which was invest in our public services, in the NHS, in policing, in education. But you've got to get things in the right order. If you don't have a stable economy, you can't invest in your public services.
But even this extra money...
This is what the Labour Party cannot understand.
Even the extra money for the NHS now still doesn't take us back to the average rate of growth of the NHS through its lifetime. You're still below that. So, despite all the boasts, you're not being generous. You're trying to make up a bit, but you're not making it up all of it, and you are still behind the average extra spending the NHS has enjoyed for the past 50 years.
We are going to put record levels of...
But they're not record levels.
They are.
Well, I've looked at the figures here. The new money you're putting in, I mean, for the first 9 years, average spending was just over 1%. The the lowest ever the NHS has experienced. The more new money you're putting in takes it up to 3.4% a year. The average trend on NHS spending is 3.6%. You can't even match the average.
No, but earlier on with Joe, you were talking about rates of growth, rates of decline, absolutes. In absolute terms, we have never given the NHS more money than we are putting forward. You're talking about rates of growth, and we would have loved to have been able to be more generous during the first 10 years of government. But if we hadn't fixed the economy, it would have been meaningless. And this is the point the Labour Party cannot understand. If you spend without earning, you break an economy. That's what they have done every time we've stepped into government after them, and that's what they would do again if they formed a government.
Without this spending is being financed by borrowing. Your 20,000 police officers that you want to recruit. Just remind me, which was the government that cut 20,000 police officers?
As Andrew, we keep coming back to this. We had to fix the economy first.
So it's just back to the future. You're only taking us back to where we were when you came to power.
After we fixed the economy. And we keep going around in circles on this, but the point is, you have to fix the economy first, otherwise spending commitments are meaningless. And you say about borrowing, the reason we are able to borrow at unprecedentedly low interest rates is because the markets, bond yields, they are confident in the Conservative Party's ability to manage the
reason
economy.
you're able to borrow,
The
reason you're able to borrow at very low yields is because every major nation in the world is able to borrow at very low yields. And Britain's
Venezuela is going to be able to do
every major economy. I said Venezuela's not. If that's the best you can do, then you really are in trouble. Everybody can borrow at low yields at the moment. And Labour said in its 2017 manifesto, we could have borrowed a bit more then, stop some of the pain. You refused to, but now you're borrowing more like Labour.
The borrowing that we are going to have as part of our economic mix, the reason we're able to do that is because we have demonstrated to the British people and to the markets that we are competent in managing the economy. They trust us to manage the economy. If we had a Labour Party, you and I both know our bond yields would go through the roof, our cost of borrowing would go through the roof, the economy would fall over again, and any promises the Labour Party made to fund doctors, nurses, other medical professionals, police, service personnel would be meaningless.
You are borrowing to spend, though. Borrowing is up 22%.
It's part of the mix. It is part of the mix.
It's up 22% this year. The deficit is over 2% of GDP now. Have you given up trying to balance the budget?
No, not at all. As I say, borrowing,
so when will you do it?
Borrowing is part of our economic mix, but also the record low levels of unemployment mean we've got more people in employment. But you're paying
you're still borrowing more. Revenues are not matching your extra spending. Labour said it would borrow more. You said that was wrong. You're now doing exactly what Labour said it would do. And you're breaking your fiscal rules, aren't you?
No, what the Chancellor made clear in the spending review is that we are determined to make sure that the NHS, schools, the police get the money they need to deliver the public services that people want.
Which is what Labour wanted to do.
Borrowing is part of that, but the reason we're able to borrow prudently is because of our good management of the economy. And as I said, the Labour Party have got no track record in good economic management. Their borrowing rates would be far more expensive.
Well, we don't know
but we all know that because the evidence of the past.
But anyway, what we know is that you are borrowing to spend. One final question. We only got 20 seconds. As party chairman, will you advise the Prime Minister to take part in TV leadership debates?
We'll discuss it. I think it will be really important to make it. Yeah.
Will you advise him?
It will be.
It's a yes or no.
It depends on the circumstances.
10 seconds, yes or no?
It depends on the circumstances.
Thank you very much. I'll be back with Politics Live at 12:15 tomorrow. Back here with another Andrew Neil show, 7 p.m. next Wednesday. Bye-bye.